Hello, and thank you for joining us for Church Com today. My name is Neil Fisher. I'm the Director of Communications for the South Carolina Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. My co-host, Carrie Graves, is the Canon for Communications of the Episcopal Diocese of Upper South Carolina. Unfortunately, Carrie can't be here this week. This week, we're talking with Dave Shrein about how you can use email in your congregations. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, Neil. Good to be here. I'm glad to talk about email, glad to talk about the church, and glad to talk about how to put the two together to further the kingdom.
That's great. So, Dave, let's get out of the box here with some questions for you.
Sounds good.
Why should congregations consider using email as part of their communications?
It's a great question, and there really is no more simpler question to ask than that. Like, why would you even consider using email in your church, in your congregation? And the question, or the answer that I give to that typical question is the reality that people really don't care about the message that you have overall when they hear it for the first time. So on Sunday morning, we think that on the platform or in a bulletin, hey, as long as we make it happen there, then it's going to be a success, or then people are going to know about it. And it's not that they don't care, it's just that they're busy, that they're preoccupied. There's a lot of different things going on in their lives, and if you rely on one point of contact at one point in time, you're really not giving your church, your programs, your events, your announcements, your news, your service times, whatever it is you're trying to communicate people, you're really not giving them an opportunity to receive that communication, to interpret it, and then to act on it. One of the great things about email is you are in complete control of when you send out a message. So let's say that your service times are going to change for the upcoming Sunday because of a change in the building, or because of it's the week after Christmas, or your service times, you're not going to have a service because it's a snow-in, or there's a problem with the building. There's all sorts of logistical reasons why you would want to use email. If you've been using it over a long period of time, and people know that they get important information from your church in their email inboxes, well, then you just fire up an email saying, hey, church congregation, wanted to let you know about a logistical detail. Now that makes sense, and that's an easy to understand. It's like, well, of course we would want to let people know about that. Well, when you start looking at the students in your church and what's happening for students, and you start looking at what you're doing for moms in your church, you start looking at even membership classes or changes to something that you're doing in the service, email becomes a really powerful tool that allows you to get that message out in another format that you are in complete control of. Obviously, we're going to talk about email for a lot, so I don't want to go too far ahead of us, but there's a lot that you can do in a logistical sense, but there's also a lot that you can do in terms of a vision and moving forward sense, keeping your message in front of people as long as they need to then, absorb and respond to that information.
Yes, that's great. Dave, there are a number of ways to use email, everything from copying in a bunch of email addresses, and hopefully they're using the blind copy. But a more efficient way might be to use a service. What are some of the services and ways, software that a congregation might use?
Yeah, you're right. It's really easy to say, hey, I'm going to fire up an email and then go through your Outlook contact list and just start adding names of the people who you think are going to be most interested in that. And that works in really small numbers when you're adding 6 or 7, maybe even 12 or 13 people. But when you start wanting to communicate with 50 people, 60 people, 70 people, you really want to start looking at using a service that's meant for that. In the same way that when you're picking out microphones for a choir, when you're picking out microphones to use for a lead vocalist, when you're picking out microphones to use for the lead pastor or the speaker or the priest, whichever it may be, there's a tool that suits that purpose. And that's the same way with email. There are tools that suit the different purposes that you have for using email. And a service that I love to point people to that's incredibly easy to get started with is a service called MailChimp. And the best part is, as you're getting your feet wet with email, It's free. You don't have to pay anything out of the box. But what a service like MailChimp allows you to do is to begin creating lists of people. And so let's say that your students are getting ready to go away for a camp. Well, if you want to announce the time that all the students need to meet at the church, you want to get that to the parents, you don't want to send that to every single person in your church, because there's a lot of people who don't have kids. There's a lot of people who have adult children. There's a lot of people who have kids, but they're not the right ages. Well, a tool like MailChimp allows for you to begin creating different lists of people that you want to communicate with. It's free. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but there is for everything. I mean, people didn't start off being great musicians. People didn't start off being great speakers. People didn't start off being great counselors in the church. And in the same way, you don't start off being a pro at knowing how to use some of these tools. But a tool like MailChimp that's free means there's really zero barriers to getting into it, and it's very straightforward to use. That's where I would recommend you start. If you tried MailChimp and you're just like, man, I can't figure it out, another one that a lot of people like to use is called Constant Contact. I personally don't. I steer people towards MailChimp, but that's another easy way to get started that a lot of people have liked to use. I recommend MailChimp.
So, like I like to say, if it's free, it's for me. So I understand that. Currently, we are using Constant Contact, and part of that is because it's a legacy product for us, and we have a large archive built up. But if I were starting over, I would seriously consider MailChimp. Okay, so you've mentioned some announcements and announcing time changes, announcing different things. What are some other things you can do with email?
Yeah, one of the lowest hanging fruit sort of thing that you can accomplish with email is welcoming visitors after they've left your church. And I'll give you an example of, I work with churches all over the country, and I work with organizations all over the country. And one of the things that we do for the churches, but for organizations as well, when they have new clients or new patients or whatever, when a church has a new visitor, we make sure that all of that information collected on a connection card or a visitor card, whatever you call it, we make sure to get those emails into MailChimp to send a short welcome sequence. Now, we assume that when they provide their email, that they are allowing for us to contact them via email, or they wouldn't provide it in the first place. But we don't just add them to a list and start sending a whole bunch of stuff. What we do is we say, you're a visitor, you've given us your email, so we're going to communicate with you via email. And we have 3 emails that we'll typically send out as a welcome sequence. The first one is just acknowledging their visit, and these are done automated. When you enter their email, these go out over time. Don't let that confuse you. Don't let that scare you. The idea here is to just recognize the person was there, acknowledge their presence, and let them know a little bit about your church. So email 1 is saying, hey, thanks for visiting with us on Sunday. We're glad to have you. Here's a couple things that you may have heard on Sunday that we talk about a lot. Here's what those mean. In the next couple days, we'll share a little bit more about our church. The second email talks a little bit about, hey, if you enjoyed Sunday and you're wanting to know more about what it means to be a part of this church, here's a little bit more information. And then the third email is an invitation to, hey, you haven't unsubscribed to our email yet. It's been a week. If you want to know more about our church and even become a member, here's membership information. So there's 3 emails that you can send to every visitor that comes through. And by doing that, you're keeping your church front and center. You're informing them along the way. People who don't want to hear from you, they can unsubscribe. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly normal behavior in our culture. So it's not like, oh man, they're unsubscribing, they must not like us at all. No, they just didn't want to hear you from email. They gave you their email address, but when they started getting messages, they said, you know what, this isn't for me. And they unsubscribe. The 4th email that we send is a final invitation to, hey, if you like getting emails from us, click here and you'll start getting the weekly newsletter that we send out. So that's one really easy way that you can begin using email immediately, is to welcome visitors. There's a second way, and I won't go into as much detail, but if anybody ever has questions for me, you can always reach out, and I know that Neil's going to give away my information at the end. But another way is just do a weekly newsletter. Use Use it for 3 maximum events. So don't have 15, 20, 30 things in there. Don't even have 5. Have 3 things at most that you want to communicate to the entire congregation, and make it simple. Don't have long chunks of paragraph. Have a picture, have 1 headline, have 2 paragraphs, and a button to where they can find out more on your website. That way, people will regularly expect to hear from you via email every single week and know, hey, if there's something going on and I don't have the information, I can go back and look at emails that they've sent, or I can check out an email that comes out in the next week, and they can reply to it as well if they ever want to know more. So those are just 2 examples of the ways churches can use emails immediately in their congregations on behalf of their staff.
Yeah. The every day we're using more and more of these things, devices, computers. Email is now being opened somewhere more than 55% on a cell phone. What recommendations, what would you suggest to somebody who needs to design a new email? They're inspired, they want to get started. Any suggestions for what they should do to be ready for that?
The first thing is to not overthink it. That's one of the barriers that people often run into, is they've seen somebody else do something. That other person had tools and staff and resources at their disposal that not everybody else has. So if you're trying to mimic what you've seen somebody else do and apply that to yours, and you're running into barriers, well, don't feel bad about yourself. You've never done it before. So don't try to feel like I have to reach this level of design or this level of appearance in order to do it. No, just make it simple. What I would say, and a tool like MailChimp does this, I'm sure Constant Contact does it as well, but I know that MailChimp does this, is they have what's called responsive email. So when somebody opens it on their desktop or when somebody opens it up on their phone, it's going to look good in both places. But I would say an overarching theme is to keep it simple. Don't try and get crazy with graphics. Maybe have 1 photo and 1 button for each item. And the photo, make it a landscape photo. Don't make it a really tall, large photo, because now they have to scroll down to get to the text. Make it a landscape photo that is wider than it is tall, and make sure that it's relevant. Use a real photo. Don't feel like you have to go into Photoshop or PowerPoint or wherever and start creating something. Just use a real picture that you took with your iPhone or you took with your Android device, or if you have some that somebody took for the church a few months ago. Use a real photo and just keep your text really plain and simple. What people are doing, and if you think about your own behavior, for anybody watching right now, if you think about your own behavior, when you open up your cell phone and you see an email, the first thing that you're looking for is who's it from, all right? So chances are you want that to be your church name. If it's from a person, you could have the church name. So you could say, I go to a church called Redemption Church dash Dave Shrein. You could say that, but Redemption Church is what they'll know me by. So you have your church name, and then the second thing they look at is the subject line. So your subject line, there's an art to it, but bottom line is you want to have just enough information to make them curious and just enough mystery to make them kind of guess. So if you said something, a change for this Sunday morning, read quickly. Well, that's just enough information, a change for Sunday morning, read quickly. Well, why do I need to read it quickly, and what type of change is this? If you say something like, your pastor is requesting prayer, well, that's very specific information, but there's a little bit of mystery. What's he requesting prayer for? As a matter of fact, we used that subject line for one of our emails 2 weeks ago, and it got over 65% opens. So that was a really powerful subject line because people were interested. And in fact, inside the first line was stuff that the pastor had been asking for prayer for. So keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Have a good from, so have your church name as the from, have a good subject line, and then make sure when they open it up, you get to the details. Don't make it really long and drawn out. People won't read your emails if that's the case. Think about the mom who's picking up her kid from school at 3:30. She has to drive immediately to drop them off at soccer practice at 3:50, and in the middle of that, she gets a bing on her email. She sees that it's come in. She drops off her kid. She opens it up. She's just going to scan real quick. Think about that person as you're writing it, and you'll do a good job.
Yeah. Dave, I really appreciate you being with us today. I really have admired your work over the years, especially with the church marketing podcast and some of the other events I've seen you at. I know you have a nice consulting business going on right now. Where can people find out more about you, your services, and especially like the email?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks so much for all the kind words, Neil. I appreciate that. I've been following you as well, and it's been fantastic to connect over Twitter and then all that we've done together for the church marketing group. You can go to daveshrein.com/email, and there's a lot of information. Now, it's not written specifically for churches because that's not necessarily who my business focuses on 100%, but all of the information applies to churches. So even though it doesn't say why churches aren't talking about email marketing or what churches should do, it still applies to the church. So if you can read everything through that filter, it's going to be a great resource for you. If you ever have any questions, you can reach out to me on my website, daveshrein.com. There's a contact section, and you can send me a message. If you have any questions at all, send me that message. If you're interested in our services, both consulting and actually, doing the email marketing and social media on your behalf, we can talk about that too. But bottom line is I'm here as a resource. I volunteer all my time with the Church Marketing Sucks and the Center for Church Communications because I have a passion and a heart to see people in the church communicate well to their congregation, because we've got a very, very important calling on our lives and on our organizations, and communication is a skill that needs to be heavily invested in. If you're relying upon just people following through with things because it's just habit, that's going to die out. And it might not die out with your current generation, but it's slowly fading out with the upcoming generations. And I'm not just talking about the millennials. I'm talking about everyone coming behind them and generations not yet born with. It's an evolving culture. And as a matter of fact, I was looking at one of my buddy's websites, justintrapp.com, and he was making the comparison how Jesus taught with illustrations and how it's completely relevant to the way we teach with illustrations today. And I would say communication is the exact same way. Jesus knew how to communicate in a way that connected with his audience. We have the exact same responsibility. So to turn a blind eye to things like email and social media, we just don't have that luxury. This is the world that we're living in. And, I don't want to be sacrilegious or anything, but if Jesus were here right now in this day, I believe he would be utilizing these same tools more effectively than anybody else, and we would have a lot to learn from him there as well.
One of the things I wanted to point out on the site there is you have a download on daveshrein.com/email. And right here, you can sign up and get that by putting in your email and download now. I was really impressed with this. This was very helpful when I was really thinking through some things while working on our own. So I appreciate that, Dave.
Yeah, and really what that is it's a complete, it's just a really simple list, not overthinking it. It's just saying, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about this? Did you think about this? And if you follow through those, it will ensure that your open rates are higher than they would be otherwise. You're new to this, so don't hold yourself to a standard that people who have been doing it for years hold themselves to. Learn to grow in it, and the email marketing checklist is a really great way to step into that and get your feet wet.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Dave. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation. It's been a lot of fun. And anytime I can chat about this digital marketing stuff and how we can do a better job of using it in the church, Neil, I am all yours.
Thank you. Well, it's time to wrap up for today. I want to go through a few things here with you. As we add more shows, we look forward to hearing from you. You can do that a number of ways. You can like us and subscribe on YouTube. On Facebook, give us a thumbs up, and please comment. We want to hear from you on these videos. It's facebook.com/churchcomtoday. We could always use some hearts on Periscope, and follow us on Twitter at ChurchComToday as well. We have our website at churchcomtoday.com, and we have a way to leave us a phone message. It's 803-638-8470. Leave your name, congregation, location, and your question or comment. Coming up next week, we will be interviewing Justin Dean, and we'll talk about communicating when unexpected things happen. Thank you for joining us for Church Come Today, and have a great day.